Hey guys, thanks for joining. We have a great guest today, Eric Jacobus, a martial artist, a stuntman, a motion capture guy, and many more. A great beardsman.
And tell them we
Beards.
got the evolution.
Oh, we got the
No
evolution.
beard.
Yes, of course. Brian the Beast Robinson right here on the upper left. You know what's funny, Brian? Like when I posted a video, I cut up part of the Simon Reese segment when we were live. And in that segment, when he was talking about best of the best, you didn't really say anything since somebody was like, "Who's that dude in the top left corner?" I was like, "Well, that's Brian the Beast Robinson," as if they should know that name. But they soon
Yeah.
will. They soon will as this podcast cast gets more and more popular. But anyway, how long did this take to grow, man?
Let's see. I shaved it about Monday, Tuesday.
Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's about. I think when I went to India to do Man Who Feels No Pain, I stopped shaving. It was about your size when I went to India.
Oh, really?
And then so at a certain point, and maybe it's because the gray is starting to take over. The gray hairs will push the black hairs out. So there's this long period where there's no growth. But it's like grayer and grayer, and I'm hoping that when I finally go fully gray, it'll get down here finally, because it just
You
won't
look like Gandalf. You look like a wizard, man.
Yeah.
A wise
That's when
wizard.
you reach the master level of kung fu.
Yes.
It's like I just
seed.
can't get that black belt. It won't come. Like it won't go past here. Eventually.
Oh, man.
So this is like 6 years.
Oh, 6 years. Wow.
But it was this long after a year and a half.
Okay, and it just stops after a while. But that's insane, man, because I don't think my beard could grow that long. Like if I just quit shaving for like a year and a half, I don't think that's going to happen.
You could check.
So that's some great beard genetics, man. Anyway, our buddy Antonio, he always joins these live chats. He says, Mr. Eric, can you share with us a bit about your journey from being a gymnast and weightlifter to becoming a martial artist and actor? Yes, this is a great way to start. We want to kind of get your background on how you became the very well-known stuntman.
Oh. Yeah, it's actually I took some martial arts when I was 12. I took Kempo karate at a strip mall. I got my yellow belt and hated it, so I left. Mm-hmm. And I said I never want to do martial arts again. That was terrible. And I got into weightlifting instead, and I wanted to look like Arnold.
Oh, sure.
And which is like really hard to do with just weightlifting.
You could look like Stallone, but you're not going to look like Arnold.
Yeah, and I got a little, but I got really strong, and I was always kind of naturally strong, but did some gymnastics too, which also got me strong. I was naturally good at like rings and the P bars, but the floor actually, P bars, whatever. And so like because I could do some acrobatics on the floor, and I was strong. It was like when I started falling on the ground, there's just something where if you're strong, I don't know, falling on the ground just doesn't hurt as bad. I don't know what it is. I think I like to think that the weightlifting helped me be strong enough to hit the concrete. I think it helps. So,
you know what's interesting? That's a good point. I do think there is a distinction between strong and tough. And weightlifting, though it makes you stronger, I think it makes you tougher if you push through it, especially if you're going to failure, So it's really the toughness, I think, man, because most people will not want to do that even if they're strong. They're like, I ain't taking that fall on the concrete.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe weightlifting had nothing to do with it. But at any rate, that was the first thing I did. And that's then cool. after I started just, my first stunt was a Hong Kong spin, and landed right on my elbow on my ribs. And I was like, that was terrible. I'm going to do it again. So I did a Hong Kong spin a couple of times and realized I could hit the concrete. And then I was hooked, started making action movies. And then I got back into martial arts and didn't really stop after that. I started with Taekwondo after that. Literally opened up a phone book when I moved to San Francisco for film school. Went to the martial arts section. Tried the first one. He was a weirdo. Tried the second one. This Taekwondo dude. And went with Taekwondo because my teacher, Andy Leung, he ended up doing contour with me. Okay. And so because he wanted to make movies too. So it was a great match.
I'm curious, what was it about Kempo that you didn't like when you started at 12?
Because I was probably, I know. because for some reason they put me in a kid with a bunch of like in a class with a bunch of 8-year-olds, and so I left. I just didn't like it.
You just
I
dominate.
think the teacher. Another thing was that the teacher, every time he'd give you a belt, he'd kick you. Like if you earned your belt, he'd kick you, and he was kind of a mean dude. I just didn't like him.
You got to block it. He's seeing if you.
No, you weren't allowed to block it.
Oh, really? Oh, that's crazy.
Wow,
one of those instructors.
Yeah, one of those instructors. Kind of had a bad taste in my mouth for martial arts.
I could see that. Yeah, I was thinking you probably just didn't have the right instructor.
Of course, that's always bad martial arts, right? You can't take a good martial art class with a bad teacher. That doesn't exist.
Well, Johnny did pretty good in the Karate Kid, I guess. Though he was dominating with a bad teacher, but well, that's a movie. Speaking of movies, so you're really primarily into the Hong Kong films, right?
I was. That was my main inspiration when I was doing films like Contour. I was just obsessed with them. Now I didn't start as a stuntman. When I was 16, 15, I got a job as a PHP programmer and a Visual Basic programmer out of college. So I was kind of a tech nerd when I was 15, and I wanted to work in a particle accelerator. I was taking calculus and physics and all this. And I learned how to make a website. This is back in 1998, back before WordPress, before YouTube.
Oh, sure.
Back when the internet was like, you got to open up Notepad and type out a website with HTML and then upload it to a server and hope that nobody hacks you, right? And so I started reviewing Hong Kong movies on this website because I got really into the action. I would just review the action, and I did like 500 Hong Kong movie reviews. And I went to Hong Kong, came back with a suitcase full of video CDs, reviewed all of them. So I had like 500 Hong Kong movies that I had analyzed just the action. I didn't even like pay attention to the story. I was just doing it for the action. I'd break these things down. I'd put all the photos and I'd talk about the stuntmen, tried to name the stuntmen, name the movements. There was another site at the time called Project J. He was kind of doing stuff like that too with Jackie's movies.
Was that a YouTube? Was it a YouTube?
Oh, that's before YouTube.
You were like a YouTuber before YouTube.
He's a website guy.
Man.
I was a Fortune City guy. If anybody knows what Fortune City was, I had a Fortune City website. And so that was like really where I was like learning cinema from and learning action design from, was just analyzing these Hong Kong movies. And at one point, I'd done 500 of these reviews, and I thought, well, let's just get a camera and do this. Like, it seems easy to do, and we just started doing it. We didn't wait for anybody. We didn't wait for funding. We were all a bunch of 18-year-olds anyway in my hometown. Might as well just do it. So that was like the first thing we did. Was I did that for like 15 years, doing this very Hong Kong style of shooting and movement and everything, right? Which is kind of a weird, difficult skill, because the Hong Kong movie style. They do what's called undercranking, where they shoot the film at 20 or 22 frames per second. So it's actually faster when they play it back. And so when you move, you're not moving at full speed. You're sort of moving at a slightly like 90% speed, and you're really accentuating the shapes. And we didn't know that. We thought we were just supposed to move that fast. And so we were trying to keep up. So we would think like really fast as we were trying to come up with these action scenes. We ended up like developing some kind of difficult habits when we started doing American stunts. Like, one of the things was that it was really hard to slow down. Because in American stunts, they want you to give like a lot of character in the movement. And I remember doing an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode, and one of the stuntmen pulled me aside. He's like, dude, slow down. You're going like 3 times faster. You look weird. They didn't invite me back to that one. And so like that was my first sort of language of action. Even though before that I had watched American B films, it was really the Hong Kong action style that caught me. Okay. So that was the first style that I learned. But then when I got to do God of War, then I had to learn the American style.
For sure. So you became like completely obsessed though with these Hong Kong films, specifically like the fights. I mean, if you're dissecting 500 of them and putting up on a website and breaking them down, I mean, you were completely obsessed with this stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, here's a comment from Kenpo Joe real quick. He's a martial arts historian.
Hey, he's my teacher. No, I'm just kidding.
Are you serious? Okay. No, well, he said that the kick of rebirth is a Parker Kenpo tradition. Sorry you had a bad Kenpo experience. So I took Kenpo too back in the day. I never got kicked. So my experience was much better.
Hey, Ed Parker was such a like childhood hero for me because I was a big Pink Panther fan.
Okay.
And Ed Parker's in the Revenge of the Pink Panther, I think. Yeah. He's got this great fight scene. And I always like remembered that fight as like having so much character. So I have nothing against Kempo. Just against
I mean, you can't, because if anybody ever watched Jeff Speakman in The Perfect Weapon, you gotta love Kempo.
Yeah, totally.
For that fact alone.
Yeah.
Hey, here's a cool question from Antonio. He said, being runner-up for the 2006 MTV Movie Awards is a huge achievement. How did that recognition influence your future projects? And what did you win it for? Can you let the audience know?
Undercut was runner-up for Best Short Film in 2006. That was pretty cool. That got us a lot of attention. At the time, I was just finishing up Contour. So when we released Contour, we were able to sort of promote it as like the team that did the film that got the runner-up for MTV movie, Best Short. So it helped for sure. Like we'd go to Comic-Con, we put the laurels up, on the video screen, and we did okay, pretty well when we first released Contour in like 2007, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that nomination really helped us. Yeah, that's to credit to Steve Reedy also. I mean, he directed Undercut. It's a fantastic movie. It's on my channel. Watch it. It's 30 minutes. I mean, Undercut came before Contour. And really the character for Law in Contour was inspired by a character that we created in Undercut. But Steve Reedy, he shot Contour also, but his way of storytelling was very inspiring for me. And I got to credit that guy a lot for what he did. So Undercut is that's a great film.
Okay. And I see that, and I've seen some of these on YouTube, and then digging through your IMDb, I mean, you have like a ton of short films. Like, and I know you've gotten attention and recognition from them. What was the ultimate goal, though? Was it just to make a great short film, or were you really trying to get Hollywood's attention, or what was like the ultimate goal with these great short films in the action genre?
Yeah, I talked to somebody about this recently. We did it because we loved it. That was it. Like we did it for no pay. We didn't expect anything. I mean, you talk about like if you look at Contour, every single guy that you see in that movie with a ski mask is one of the main actors because we didn't have enough people. We did it because we loved it. I mean, we ate pavement for that movie. And I always tell people that like if you want to do indie films, you have to love it. Like the money comes later, the fame, forget it. Just don't even think about it. If you love it, do it. Mm-hmm. And then like the other great things will come from there. And you don't know what those things will be. And really like, for us, talking about the era of 2001, right? This is when we started. And Hong Kong cinema had sort of like nosedived in terms of its like martial arts action. And it had come over to the States for a brief moment in the late 90s, because like with the Hong Kong handover to China, a lot of those Hong Kong actors, like all the big ones, came to America, right? In Australia, right? That was when Jackie was doing Rush Hour, Shanghai Nights, Shanghai Noon, and all the stunt guys were coming over to America and like basically showing American stuntmen like how this is done, right? It was a big wake up call for a lot of American stunt guys. And you'll see this with like a lot of the guys that worked with Sammo Hung on martial law at the time. And like The Matrix is a Hong Kong movie, man. I don't care what you say. Like that's a Yuen Woo-ping action film because it's not shot like an American action film. But that sort of sentiment, sort of that style of action in America was a great like golden age for us. And we were so excited. We thought that if we learned the Hong Kong style, we would have an in Hollywood. because it just made sense, right? We were seeing, Crouching Tiger was an international hit. It's like, oh,
Sure.
we'll learn wuxia, Matrix. Oh, we'll learn kung fu. We'll be able to do movies just like these guys. And then like something happened like around 9/11, and then we got into like Bourne Identity territory. And I look at Bourne now and I see some like beauty there, but at the time I really just couldn't see like how are we supposed to be great performers in a movie like Bourne? How do we do what we do? So to us, it was like, well, screw it. Let's just keep on doing the Hong Kong thing on the side, and just keep that torch burning. That's what we wanted to do. So to us, it was like kind of religious in a way, right? Like we have this thing that we were inspired by. It's what brought us together. This is community that we formed online. And we had a forum on my website. We'd share sound effects. We'd post all of our short films. This is before YouTube, right? This is like 2000, 2001. We had a community across the world, and we were all united by this thing. And then suddenly it's like Hollywood's like, no, we're going to do shaky cam and rapid fire editing. And we all were like, all right, guys, well, we got to hunker down and like keep this torch burning. And we just did it because we loved it. And look where we are now. John Wick is sort of like a revival of the Hong Kong style. And
everything's cyclical, you know. It took a while to come back, but it came back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Of all those films that you've done, you know, of course, you got Death Grip, Rope-a-Dope, Blindsided. There's so many. Like, which one are you like the most proud of, and why?
Well, I think that the one that that's a tough one because like there are different sort of like sort of different elements, right? Like I think that Rope-a-Dope 2 is probably the most performative of anything I've ever done. It's probably the most performative. And that was like, even just like on a comedic level and storytelling, that was sort of like when I hit my stride. But then in terms of just character, I think Blindsided is like really up there. And that was Clayton directing me. And that was a moment for me to just, really like tackle acting and performance in a new way. And I took it very seriously. I trained with a blind guy, and then enjoyed every moment of that. So yeah, if we could have done something where it's like because we didn't have enough time in Blindsided. We basically shot that entire thing in like a week and a half with no money, right? Well, Rope-a-Dope 2 was pretty leisurely. We got like 6 days to shoot that tiny short film.
Okay.
And so that's why the action is like off the wall. Those are the two that I would pick.
Cool, man. Hey, here's a question about Death Grip. Antonio says, Death Grip in 2011 was a significant project for you. What inspired the story, and how did you navigate the challenges of funding the production?
Man, that story was inspired by a friend of mine who ended up in jail.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't even think about this because the script went through like a million versions. And then years later, as I'm thinking about like, how the hell did I come up with this movie idea? And it was this sort of like really hard time in my life. That's why that movie's like super dark. But I think everybody goes through a dark patch at least once, and you got to get it out.
Sure.
I was watching a lot of Takeshi Kitano movies at the time. So there's a lot of kind of like Takeshi Kitano style humor. But you never want to be too funny in a Takeshi Kitano movie. You got to kill somebody pretty quickly after a joke. So in terms of the funding, I had my life savings that I had been saving up for years, knowing that I wanted to do something like this. I dumped all that in there. And then we made like a very simple LLC like you're supposed to. And I raised like another 50 maybe from friends, colleagues, family. And there it was. And then I think we had like 10,000 from Indiegogo also.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And that money worked out for us. We definitely carried us through a hell of a lot more than we had to make Contour.
Sure.
Wow.
So you're really known, of course, from these films, and you could find a lot on YouTube, but I guess you had like a ton of success in the video game space, though, right?
Yeah, that's
Here's a question from my buddy Nick. How is it working in the video game industry, by the way?
well. I would say, I had a brief stint between, um, rope-a-dope and working in video games in Hollywood. I did a few Hollywood gigs, not many. I think that I'm not cut out for it. I'm not. I don't live in LA. I never did, so I
Okay.
had to commute. And
Okay, so you're in California, though. Wouldn't they pay for your travel?
I was in California, but no, they wouldn't. I mean, I was just trying to hustle at the time.
Okay.
I was starting from like the bottom floor still. So
Hmm.
even though I had done all these indie films, and the people who brought me on were my seniors. They were always the like the head guys at 87 would be the ones that would call me. I say, hey,
Okay.
come in and like do this gig. But I think that it's a life where like if you don't live in LA, and if you're not in the gyms regularly, it's very difficult to have a life in stunts there. So I couldn't move to LA. I just wasn't going to do it. I had recently, met my wife, and we were in the Bay Area, and that was where my family was, and I was just
Oh,
like,
okay.
I'm gonna
Okay.
stay there, and then, we had started raising a family there, and so when I did some previs jobs overseas, in like China, for example. And then when I came back from China, I was just like sick as a dog because I think I accidentally ate dog in China.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, on set one night, the director said, "Here, try this food." It was delicious. I'm like, what is this? I don't quite know what I ate, but it made me deathly ill almost. I came home and I just was like, I don't want to go overseas again. I don't like doing any of this stuff. I don't like being away from home. I just want to focus on myself. I started doing Tekken in real life in my garage, and then that got me noticed by Sony Santa Monica, and they brought me in to do Kratos for God of War, to do the stunts for Kratos.
Oh, nice.
And that transition, going from Hollywood to video games, that's a very different world in video games. Like if you compare Hollywood to this it's sort of a marketplace of stunt as a stuntman. You're kind of going from gym to gym to gym, trying to meet coordinators. You're schmoozing at different, gatherings and whatnot. You're trying to go to UFC parties and you're trying to crash sets and wrangle pads for this guy and do previs for this guy. That's a very different life than trying to do stunts in video games, where in order to do stunts in video games, you basically have to breach a castle wall of the video game company. And like, how do you get into a video game company? It's extremely difficult. And so when they called me to go in, I started just like making inroads and making sure that I stayed there. So it's a very different business. But in terms of performance, doing video game motion capture is nothing like movie stunts, nothing. And I can get into that more if you want, but I'll leave it at that for now.
I'm curious. We'll have to dig into that. Hey, you might have somebody here who wants to invest in one of your projects. By the way, this guy said, how do we get in touch with you for future potential projects as an investor? So let people know how to get in contact with you.
Oh, cool. You can reach me at booking@ericjacobus.com. Actually, you can. I also have a YouTube channel. I don't have any social media anymore. I'm really a Luddite now. So, I think my booking at Eric Jacobus. You can just do theericjacobus@gmail.com. That's a safe one. The Eric Jacobus.
There you go. That's an easy one.
I'd be happy to talk to you.
To remember. Speaking of future projects, I had a question I wanted to ask you. Like, what's your ultimate goal? Like, is there a dream project that you would love to make, be it a short, a feature, or I don't even, maybe it's something even in the video game space, but is there like a dream project?
I have a script called Violent Rhythm, and we have a proof of concept for it. I'll release it at some point. It's animated, and I own and run a motion capture studio. I'm here right now. This is not a motion capture room. This is my mad science library. Motion capture studios behind this wall here. Okay. And we do we're able to make a film using motion capture fairly easily. And the things that you can do with motion capture in action, I think that we barely scratched the surface of what's possible. And I have a film that's like a really fun concept that I would love to get off the ground. But an animated feature film is very difficult and very expensive to put together. And
I
it's
have a quick
yeah.
question about that. Now somebody that we're involved with, and who I'm thinking about, and he started talking about anime, is Vic
Vic
Mignogna.
Mignogna, one of the biggest voice actors in the world.
Yeah, and we do a lot of stuff with him. Good friend of ours.
Cool.
Probably somebody that interesting to do. So he even has a studio where they do the voiceovers for the Japanese animes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Talk to him. Send him the script. See if he likes it.
Would be nice to have you guys talk. Maybe we'll have hook them up. I think that would be great.
Yeah, for sure, man. So this animated project, so it sounds like you and your team would be basically performing the movements, the fighting, the motion capturing, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. The way that I would approach it, and I learned this from doing video games. And by the way, like it's not just an animated action film. It's an animated action comedy musical. And
okay,
the main character, and it's not a High School Musical type musical. The music is the action scenes. So it's like a Running Man style game show where contestants go on and they perform with an instrument. The main character is a violinist, and they perform in like the most incredibly dangerous situations possible, and they try and complete a song basically in these very dangerous situations, right? And so he has to get through these challenges involving fight scenes and whatnot. So the violin is part of the fight scene. But what you have to consider is like if he's playing a violin and he hits a guy, well, that's a note right there. When he goes, like that's a note. So I'm not a composer, so I have to choreograph with the composer. You think about that. I have to make the fight with the music composer. And so it's an interesting way to like design action that I think is like super exciting. And I don't think it's really been done. It's, the closest is probably something like Whiplash, right? Whiplash, where the music is part of the scene. It's not like a cutaway. It's like instrumental to every scene. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing you never lacked, it's originality. Because I watched the interview that Scott Adkins did with you, and he was like, like you had these great ideas, and he was like, I wish I came up with that first. Well, here's another one, man. This sounds pretty. Yeah, like I haven't seen anything like that. It sounds amazing, man.
Yeah, and so with that, I mean, you have to have like 3 performers, right? You have to have a stunt performer doing the action. Then you need a violinist to do the accurate violin movements. If it's the same person, that's great. It's going to be difficult. It's possible. And then you need a voice actor. So what I would probably do is I would shoot the entire movie as a radio play with voice actors and get them done, and then let them sort of dictate the cadence of all the dialogue. And then we would dub the action over that. So we would like dub a movie over the voiceover. That's organic, that way they're not forced into acting, at specific moments and whatnot. They can dictate the pace.
Very cool, man. Very cool. Here's another great question. Antonio, he always has good questions. He's asking, working with a team of 30 plus members in the stunt people must have been quite an experience. How did you manage such a large group effectively?
I didn't. I was not effective at all. I was a horrible leader. Oh my gosh! Like, I mean, you're a bunch of like 22-year-old males, and there's some females too. And oh man, it was such a crazy time. One thing that helped was every Sunday we would get together and do stunt class from like noon till 9 p.m. We just take
wow. Okay.
School all day. And a lot of it was like messing around, doing martial arts, trying new stuff, hitting on girls, obviously. We would shoot short films. Like these guys would be over here shooting a short film. We'd be shooting this, and I'd be getting contour ready over here. And then we'd play stunt ball, and then we'd all go out to eat and stay out till 2 a.m. And then I'd go to class the next day at 6 a.m. And so like that kind of like weekly gathering together, that really kind of held things together. I mean, we continued doing that while we were making Contour.
Mm-hmm.
We did that for years, and that really helped keep the group together. And then kind of like as soon as that I accidentally forgot to lock the door at the Taekwondo school one night, and we got kicked out basically.
Oh,
And
really? Wow.
and then like the group kind of like disintegrated soon after that. But like it's and like I keep in contact with a lot of those guys. But when we were at 30 people, that was madness.
Yeah, I imagine. So, did some of these guys and or girls like end up going big in Hollywood, or did they get into video games too, or did they stay independent, or did they, you know, like?
Yeah, I mean, you look at guys like Dennis Rule, for example, has done really well in video games. He does the Call of Duty games now.
Oh, cool.
Vlad Rimberg, he's all over doing TV shows. I think he's second year directing shows now too, and
Wow.
he does some big stuff. But a lot of the sort of like Stunt People alumni, we were all very indie kind of oriented, and there wasn't a big drive toward going to Hollywood for us. Like to us, it was about the art form. A lot of the guys, after the Stunt People, they just went back to doing martial arts because that's what they love. They didn't do it for fame. And I didn't either. I just wanted to do cool art, and I do all kinds of art now too. Like motion capture is an art form to me now,
Oh,
and
for sure,
I do writing now, and so it's kind of like a little bit of a different path that we took.
Speaking of martial arts, this guy is asking, who's the best martial artist you ever worked with and learned from?
Mark Dacascos.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I interviewed him a couple of years ago, because I grew up, I seen Only the Strong and it blew me away, because I've never seen capoeira and all the gymnastics side into martial arts. So, yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, he's an amazing performer even to this day at his age.
Amazing performer, and he's a great guy. He's a great guy. It's just rare to find a guy like that who's achieved as much as he has, and he has the personality of somebody who is just doing art, and that's very hard to find. When you talk to a guy like that, he's not trying to sell you. He's not trying to like book himself on the next thing. He's not trying to see what you have that he can get from you. It's not like that. He's just a different dude. He just operates on like a better level than that. The high quality guy.
That's great. Yeah, that's good to hear. And I think you met him doing like a Mortal Kombat. Was it a web series?
Yeah. It was for Machinima back then.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was a green, again, this is early in my Hollywood career. This is 2012. And, it was a stuntman being pulled in to do an acting role, basically. And I was just like a total fish out of water. And guys like him and Casper Van Dien is another guy. He's not like a martial artist, but just as an actor and as a guy, another quality guy. And they were like, they saw that I was scared and didn't know what I was doing. And, they just made it easier for me.
Okay.
Whereas like, a mean-spirited person might have like tried to make it harder for me to show me what it's like or something, right? Because maybe that happened to them and they want to, exploit other people now, but they're not like that.
Okay. Is that aspect something you didn't really want to pursue too much as far as like the acting, the dialogue, all that? Because you come across pretty natural in your short films and stuff that I've seen.
I don't mind doing that. I'm not good at auditioning. I've always had a hard time auditioning. I'm not good at acting classes. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like I don't know. I have a very hard time committing to an acting moment if it's not being recorded for the final thing. It's like I get
I could see that. It's hard to get there unless it's like you're really there,
and that's where like the skill comes in, right? For like, I can be natural, but there's a skill component there that I don't have. That a trained actor, like as a trained actor, you learn how to audition, you learn how to do cold reads, you learn how to put a camera up and act something like a role that is like totally unnatural to you, but you're going to make it work. Like that's where the skill comes in. And that was like that. I think that there are just many people who are far better far better than me at that.
Okay. You know, it's funny. I was speaking to one of my friends. Shout out to Nemo if you're watching, by the way. And he's got a film coming out pretty soon with Van Damme's daughter, Bianca, and also Eminem's brother. But he was telling me, because like a lot of the auditions now, you just do them, you send it in. So even if, because I know a lot of really great actors suck at auditioning. But if they could spend time and work on it and film it and just like, okay, this is the one and send that in, then their odds of like booking the role are that much greater. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, auditioning stuff.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'd be better now. I don't know. I think I've gone through a lot more in life. I have a lot to draw from. I can draw tears. Yeah. I can draw laughter. I can do that stuff now. Whereas, 10 years ago, I was still a kid.
Here's another cool question from Antonio, by the way. He says, as a filmmaker, what themes or messages do you aim to convey through your work?
Okay. I have two answers to this. The first one is, this is an answer for people ask sometimes, how do I shoot my action film? How do I make my action film? And I used to have a very set answer. I would say, well, look at Hong Kong films, look how they do it. I don't do that anymore. I say, I just ask a question back. How do you see reality? Right? How do you perceive reality? When something flies by you, do you turn and look at it? Or do you let it fly past you so that you can keep looking where you're looking? How do you see reality? How do you experience the world? Show that to people, right? Do it the way that you see reality. People will catch on, right? The way that the Born Identity director and editor see the world is very different than the way I see the world.
Sure.
The way Neil Blomkamp sees the world is very different than the way that I see the world. And when I watch a Neil Blomkamp movie, you sort of get into his head. You don't even have to have the audio on. You can just sort of look at the way he chooses his shots and the way he moves camera and the way that he pieces things together. And I go like, damn, there's no way I could do that. And I kind of enjoy the experience of being in his head for a moment. And so what I like to do is like try and convey how I see the world. And I don't really know how I see the world. I just put it in the film and I read the top YouTube comments, and that's how I see the world. I like to try and the message, like for example, in Rope-a-Dope 2 that I was trying to convey is that, and I keep pushing this message now, is that so much of the crisis of violence is due to escalation between people, and a lot of the time it's like it's not very obvious why the fight starts. Right? It's not very clear. It's like if you watch the Duelists, Ridley Scott's Duelists, what starts as an insult becomes this like lifelong rivalry. And I think that kind of stuff is so human, right? These like little nuanced things that we do, these like these tiny little drops in the pond, and this little butterfly effect that can like come back as like a big wave and hit you in the face, and then you hit him back and he pulls a knife and everybody's dead, right? That can be funny, right? Everybody dying can be funny. But like that's something that I like to point to as like an absurdity and like a truth about human nature, which is that like these little tiny things that we don't even think about can cause a fight, which can turn into a feud, into a civil war, into a world war. And that's how things go in this world, man. And I think that's heavy.
You think on the psychological part, huh? I think that's interesting. A lot of people write movies, but there's no real, I can't relate to that character because I don't see something in that character in me. And when they reveal something that, irritates me, but nobody ever knows that irritates me, but I see that character losing their, you can always relate and say, oh man, yeah, I got that same temper.
Yeah, that's like one of the beautiful things of someone like Chaplin or the Marx Brothers is that they put themselves they sort of put themselves out there as the fall guy, right? Where like you expect the audience is going to laugh at you because of how ridiculous you are, because you're making a fool of yourself, right? But you're not actually self-deprecating. because you're at the center of the scene and you're having people, not only are they laughing at you, but they're identifying with you. So the audience ends up laughing at themselves, and that could be a conversion experience for people. And that can bring people out of a movie theater going like, man, I mean, like The Great Dictator. And it's like, man, I laughed at that movie, but something changed on the inside after I saw that.
It's interesting you say that, because what's his name was used Charlie Chaplin, the other movie producer. It's interesting. The guy we just had on last time.
Oh, Sam Furstenberg, Canon Films director.
He went right to the same. When I asked something like that, he went right to the same. That's interesting that you're saying it now.
Yeah. I mean, that's just like I think that and Jackie Chan really is like very similar to this, right? Like he doesn't play a goof, but he plays a guy who doesn't want to fight. And so as an audience member, you're in this kind of double bind, right? Where you go in to see Jackie Chan fight, and now you're in Jackie Chan's head and he doesn't want to fight. So you are like, oh, I don't want to fight, but I want to see him fight. And it's this like tension, and he's trying to get out of the fight. And that's genius, right? To play it like that. And I think he's really like that, right? I think that he's actually like the movies where he fights the hardest are when he's directed by Sammo Hung or Stanley Tong, or like Stanley Tong. Stanley Tong. But the movies where Jackie's in control, like he doesn't want it. And it's always like a last resort to him.
Okay. And you inject a lot of comedy in your films, so I'm assuming obviously Jackie Chan was a huge influence for you. I got a question though, because you did go through and reviewed like 500 Hong Kong films. What are like your top 5? Do you have a top 5?
Oh. Well, A Drunken Master 2 is like,
oh yeah, of course,
sort of the showstopper. I don't know. It's hard to top that. Prodigal Son, like definitely in my top 5. Maybe it's the top one. Sammo Hung's Prodigal Son, 1981. Just in terms of just as an overall film, I think that movie is like on a quality level that is like really difficult to achieve. Not just the story, I mean the action. Like you still can't make action like that. You still can't do it. And that movie's 45 years old almost. I challenge anybody to make action like Prodigal Son. I don't think it'll happen. Oh man, I mean it's so hard to pick. Like I mean a lot of my favorite movies are like Jackie and Sammo Hung movies. I love Dragons Forever just because of how fun it is. And I think like Dragons Forever inspired a lot of indie filmmakers just because it feels like a collaborative movie, or like the Picking Opera brothers are getting together and making these like super fun characters. And I was never much of a Shaw guy, Shaw Brothers guy. I love Lau Galerung, but otherwise I was never really into Shaw. So, if I were to pick one of his movies, probably Mad Monkey Kung Fu would be my Shaw film of choice. If I had to pick a weapon movie, it would be Blade. The Blade, excuse me, not Wesley Snipes, but The Blade. It's The Blade.
The Blade, okay.
Now. And that's a Troy Hark's film. And then for my 5th, I think and everybody hates me for this, but I pick Legend of the Wolf as my favorite Donnie Yen movie. Because it's a wuxia film without wires, and I think it's a thing of beauty.
Okay, speaking of Troy Hark, even because a lot of the performers came out here to America like in the late '90s, but the directors like John Woo, Chow Hark did 2 Van Damme movies, Knockoff and Double Team. Like, did you watch those? What do you think of those?
Wasn't really into those.
No. Were you ever into Van Damme at all?
Yeah, loved Van Damme.
Okay.
I mean, before my Hong Kong movie phase, I was in a small town. I didn't even know where Hong Kong was. And I didn't know who Jackie Chan was or anything. So the only martial art movies I knew were like Shoot Fighter and Best of the Best and Bloodsport. And so I went through the whole, martial arts section at the video store. And I saw all of Van Damme's movies. And I think that you got to credit Van Damme for like inventing the kick shape in America. Like before him, I know Chuck Norris kind of was that guy, but I think Van Damme turned it into a shape, made it like you think in terms of comic books, right? Like the really iconic comic books have these shapes and these poses, right? And Chuck was really good at the performance aspect, but Van Damme made the shape.
I like how you're saying that. It's like the drawing. It's true. When he kicked, it's like that's how you would draw it in a comic book.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even like a proper kick. Like he literally jumps up, spins, and just lifts his legs up like this. And as a kick, you're gonna fall on your ass if you do that. But like he makes a beautiful shape, and they knew how to shoot it. And he might have been part of that decision where he's like, I'm gonna do this shape.
I think he was part. I know he was part of the editing. So luckily they got enough coverage because in the posing. So he's got the bodybuilding background, he's got the ballet background for the gracefulness, and then I don't know where he studied the filming part. I think it had to have been in Belgium. Actually, I think I heard some stories of a photographer he was working with that would shoot certain angles. So, I mean, I don't know how much controllers say he had over some of his early productions because they had a great cinematographer for Bloodsport, David Worth, right? Yeah. Very seasoned guy. But I do know for a fact that Van Damme was in the editing bay. So luckily they had enough coverage. He would get, he does one kick, there might be 3 cuts, and you might even see the hit twice and slow-mo. And so, I mean, he definitely brought a certain style for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it really defined a generation. You got to give him credit for that.
Oh yeah, and I do. People who watch the channel, I'm all about Bloodsport. And other Van Damme movies for sure, man. But
I have one more quick question for you, and I don't. So you talked about humor in the martial arts. One of my favorite, and I think one of the funniest scenes is in Return of the Dragon in the back. When they're in the back of the restaurant and the guy's trying to use the nunchuck and he's whacking himself and he's trying to copy him. And that guy wasn't an actor. I think there were like a bunch of some guy's friends, but I have to say the guy, I don't know if he thought of that or what, but he literally was the for me, I always laugh when I see that scene. Yeah. So like, I don't know, natural. And I don't know.
It's funny because as a viewer, you don't even have to know what nunchucks are for that joke to work.
Yeah,
like that joke works because it's just anatomically correct, right? It's like it's something that you wouldn't think of as an audience member. I mean, as an audience member, you're sort of like used to Bruce doing the nunchuck thing, right? So you're expecting that, and I imagine, I could be wrong, that Bruce was behind that decision. I mean, he directed the movie, and he knew exactly what the audience expected. Right. And he's a natural comedian because he knows exactly what the audience is. They think he's going to do this. Okay. No, what happens when you actually pick up a pair of nunchucks and you start swinging? You hit your nuts and you hit yourself in the forehead. So you're going to do that. And the audience is going to get it. And he's right. That's like, and that's something about Bruce is that he knew how to play the audience 100%. He knew how to frame kicks. He knew how to shoot. He knew how to perform everything. He didn't even have to I would say that like his kicks were not up to snuff when he first started. He sort of learned this as he went. You watch like Big Boss, he's pretty raw, but before that, even in I was going to say Batman, Green Hornet. In Green Hornet, his kicks are really basic, right? But then when he goes to Hong Kong, he starts working with Lo Wei. He'd been learning the kicking in LA from these Americans. A lot of Americans who had come from like Vietnam, like Chuck, and these guys that had brought kicks from Korea. And Bruce was figuring out how to shoot these things because in America, they weren't really shooting kicks. They weren't even making kick movies. Nobody was doing kicks in movies. I'm sure Bruce saw an opportunity there. And he probably knew that people are expecting, the chop socky kung fu stuff. People are expecting that. Okay. But when I put my kick up here, it's going to do something to people. And he was right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Van Damme had to have been heavily inspired by Bruce Lee because Muhammad Kisi, Van Damme's best friend growing up, who I interviewed and talked to quite a bit, told me they used to sneak in the theater as kids and watch the Bruce Lee movies. And you'll see a lot of the poses and all that stuff that Bruce and the noises. There's only like 2 guys you could think of that I could think of in martial arts movies who make these really iconic karate noises. It's Bruce Lee and it's Van Damme. It's nobody else really,
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And so was Bruce Lee like an inspiration to you at all? Because you haven't really talked about Bruce much, aside from just
Yeah, you know, the only Bruce Lee movie I ever saw growing up was Enter the Dragon, and I saw that when I was young, and that's a horror movie, right? The end of that movie is scary, and as a kid, I was like, I don't want this Bruce Lee guy. He's scary. He never really inspired me until much later. I think I got back into watching Bruce's movies, and you know, like the versions that we had growing up were these full screen pan and scan dubs that are just embarrassing. I know some people think that they're kind of fun, but I hated watching movies like that. So then I think I don't know, maybe it was Dragon Dynasty or someone who released the Bruce Lee movies later in the 90s or something, and they were widescreen. I got to finally watch these things in their original format. And I think, you know, you're talking about the 70s, which is a different kind of era. I grew up on the fast-paced Hong Kong stuff, and Bruce is much more of a Japanese style performer. You know, one of the rumors is that, you know, Bruce met Shintaro Katsu, who is Zatoichi. He went to Toei Studios, or Shintaro came to Golden Harvest, one or the other. They met, and Shintaro Katsu told Bruce before Bruce did Fist of Fury, he said, Bruce, the way that you make your fights really work is by adding in what's called ma. Ma in Japanese is the pause. It's sort of the anticipation. Hong Kong movies don't really use ma. They don't really utilize the anticipation. It's sort of like rapid fire and musical. It's like a picking opera, right? Like Beijing opera, it's like dang, 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 dang. You kind of keep the flow going. It's a flow state. It's very like intoxicating. But you compare that to like a Japanese film where ma is everything. Like the buildup is everything because everybody's gonna die. That's the buildup. You know, if this sword comes out, everybody dies. So let's talk it out. And then it's really tense. And then when the sword comes out, everybody dies. And so that was Bruce's style. And so Bruce's films, you know, even though he's got a lot of, you know, Hong Kong performers that he's working with, it's a very Japanese style of action film. You know, nobody was really making movies like that in the 70s in Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's interesting insight there.
Were you ever inspired like by the Japanese swordman movies of the 50s and like way back when the guys really were still training like they were going to fight somebody with a sword?
You know, I never appreciated those until much later in life. Because again, I was raised on that dan 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 dan. I was raised in the Beijing opera style Cantonese films, right? And then and I was raised on Arnold movies too. It's totally different than a samurai film. And it's like they're their own art forms. I never quite understood Chambara samurai films. Never understood like what the big deal was. Like why all this waiting around? Like why are we trying to talk? Why don't you guys just fight? That was what I was thinking. Then two things happened. First thing that happened was when I did Blindsided, I took an Iaido class, a Japanese sword class. And I learned what is involved in drawing and cutting. And that's all I did for all the class. It was, you know, you sit kneeling and you just draw and cut and then sheath. Draw and cut and sheath. Sometimes you do the triple, you know, draw overhead and then wipe. And that's all I did. I sort of learned and then, you know, tried experimenting at my house and cut my finger open. And I realized like, oh, this sword, if it touches anybody anywhere, if it cuts 2 inches deep, that person's going to die. So that taught me one thing. And the second thing was when I was doing motion capture on a game called Demon Souls. I did the protagonist.
Game,
did the main character. And that's a Japanese game. And I had been doing God of War for 2 years before I did Demon Souls. And so I thought I was like the expert mocap guy. So I go in to do Demon Souls first day. And I'm like, I'm ready to do motion capture. And they say, okay, well, first move is the sword cut. So I did it kind of like Kratos, like a really big move, a lot of character. And the director's like, no. You need to learn how to move in a Japanese way. And I was like, whoa. I had a Keanu Reeves like mind moment. I was like, what does that mean? So I spent a year learning how to move in a Japanese way, whatever the hell that means, right? And what that meant ultimately, it was like a very like gradual anticipation, like trying not to show your cards before you do an attack. And then when you actually do the attack, you just get through the hitbox, hit an end pose, and then go back to your idle pose. And after doing that for a year, I thought, okay, I can move like a Japanese guy. And then I watched a Chambara movie and I understood it.
Oh, that's cool. How long does it take to like motion capture games? So, for example, like how long did you work on God of War?
God of War, I did 2 years, and I think I came in halfway through.
What two? You mean you were literally like, were you going in like a 9 to 5 job for 2 years?
No, it doesn't work like that. No, they usually call you in like 2 days a month.
Oh, so a couple days a month. Okay, okay.
Yeah. Now
For
God of
2 years.
God of War Ragnarok, we did that here at the studio. We did the gameplay capture here at our. That was our first contract in my studio. And
Oh,
that
wow.
was a 3-year game.
Wow.
It was 3 years, and we would shoot 2 or 3 days a month, but it was a lot. And plus shoots, we would now go there to their studio to do some cinematics shoots, but we did like most of the gameplay here.
Okay. How many people do you have on your team working like at your mocap studio?
We have 8 people.
Oh, that's cool, man. Any of the guys from back in the day from the stunt team?
No, but who was just here was Dennis. Dennis was just here. But no, none of those. We had a full-time stuntman working with us. His name is Phil. He worked with me on all the games that we've done here. But now I'm the only in-house stunt performer.
Okay. Hey, here's a question from Antonio.
Sure.
Can you share a funny or memorable behind-the-scenes moment from one of your films that fans might not know about?
That's a tough one. Can we come back to that?
Sure.
About that. That's a tough one. There have been many.
I would
On the
think
spot,
there's probably
I feel like I'd have a hard time coming up with one.
quite a bit, quite a few of them. Are there any specific projects that you want to promote like right now that are coming out soon or things you're working on?
I'm actually writing a book.
Okay.
It's called The Art of Violence, and it's sort of an encapsulation of my philosophy on action design and violence. And I'm I'm a little bit nervous. It's my first book, but I have kind of a novel theory on violence and language that I think that is very readable. I think people will enjoy it, even if you're an action film fan. I hope that people will enjoy this because it's a different way of looking at violence, right? Because a lot of the time what we hear from the media is that we hear one of two things. We hear violent video games cause violence, and then we hear violent video games don't cause violence. Like, I don't know if it's so cut and dry as this. I don't think violence is as cut and dry. I think that there's a lot more nuance, and I think that also the way that action films shoot their action scenes and why certain things sort of survive over, in terms of what we remember about a period, about an era, is sort of dictated by what was going on at the time. And I think Born Identity is a good example. I think that maybe there's some aspect of how traumatizing something like 9/11 was to Americans that might have been like captured by the Born Identity films. And that over time, it sort of like makes more and more sense because there were a lot of other films at the time that were not shot like Bourne. Like Star Wars Episode 3 came out, the Matrix films kept coming out. They weren't shot like Bourne, but Bourne is sort of like what stuck over time in our memory. And so I think that there's like a very interesting feedback between like real world violence and art or language, and it's something I'm excited to explore.
When do you anticipate this book might be out?
I'm aiming for fall 2024. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I definitely want to read that for sure. That sounds good. Hey, here's a cool comment. Oh, I got a question related to this, by the way, from Dwayne Johnson. He says, "I liked your interview on the art of action with Scott Adkins, which was a great interview. And Scott Adkins, he's an amazing performer, actor, martial artist, etc. And he respects you a lot, and he talked about your Kictionary video, which is insane. Like you basically doing every kick known to man and performing it, greatly. But the question I have is because he even asked you too like I think he framed it as like, what's the deal? It's like you got all this talent, you did all these movies, and you kind of explained earlier that you're not really a Hollywood guy. But have you ever thought, or has he asked you to work on a film with him? Because I think you guys would do an amazing fight scene together.
There have been a few missed opportunities working with Scott. It was nobody's fault. It just didn't happen. I mean, he is like, I think in terms of just like our industry, he's sort of like the great martial art hero of my generation. So, a guy who is great at acting. He's very handsome guy. Some of us don't benefit from this as much as he does. I don't quite have the look. I have the looks for motion capture, but he's also extremely talented, and he has a podcast. Like, the guy's got a brain. That's the thing. He understands the entire process of filmmaking. So he's like, this is part and parcel to his success, is that he's able to see behind the action in ways that I think a lot of action stars, martial artists and whatnot, they can't, or they just choose not to. For him, he takes an active interest in how his films are shot, how it's edited. He has a brand, and like that's like much. I mean, one of the things that I found, like, one of the most interesting insights that he gave me was that when he was doing Undisputed 2, he was trying to figure out like how he moves. He didn't even know like who he was on camera, and he realized that he needs to stop posing. So he created this like no pose style of movement, where he's just like constantly moving. He didn't like strike the Hong Kong pose anymore. He stopped that. And that's like very, very intuitive brand recognition on his part, right? Sort of like Donnie Yen's same method, where like you figure out like what people are looking at with you, what do they want to see, and he figured that out. So, that guy all around is like legendary in like every way, and he's mentored me. I have a podcast too, and he mentored me when I was starting my podcast.
Oh, nice.
So. Yeah, that guy's amazing.
And speaking of Undisputed 2 and the Boyka character, I mean, that was like his breakout. Like that was the movie. Michael Jai White was good in it too, but that was Scott Adkins is the one that really sticks out in that one. And that kind of like, when I seen that, I was like, who is this guy? Because I'd never seen him before. I had to like look into him and like, what did he do before this? And yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy if you think about that. That movie is almost 20 years old, which is nuts, because he's still doing all that stuff now. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they came out with the 5th one.
Yeah. Isaac said that, when they were sort of like working through that character, I think they realized how much stock the audience was going to put in this character. And they knew that they had a future hero on their hands, right? And that's why Undisputed 3 is like a Boyka movie. Undisputed 4 is a Boyka movie. Mm-hmm. And that's like that's a super cool kind of like meta story for Scott, Like, he's a stuntman who came up doing like Hong Kong movies like Black Mask 2 and Extreme Heist. Is that what it was? No, not Extreme Heist. Extreme Challenge or something.
Yeah, Extreme Challenge.
And becomes so much more than that. Like, he's an icon. He's an action star who can do anything.
He's a writer, a producer, has his own production company. So, yeah, like you said, man, he does it all. Here's a cool question, and I was kind of thinking about something like this too that I wanted to ask, especially because of Blindsided. Have they ever had you on the set to help out with the stunts for the new season for Daredevil: Born Again?
Nope, never been on Daredevil.
Because that's even something that you look like the character, like in Blindside, and obviously you move like the character. I mean, that would be, I think, a perfect role for you, even as an advisor for that, because you basically played it.
Yeah, put my name out there. See if they
put your name out there.
Yeah, there's Micah. Hey, Micah.
Oh, dude. Oh, so yeah, you know what's funny? Like, so Micah is Quan Kicker. He was a huge YouTuber, and he kind of disappeared. And I interviewed him not that long ago, but something cooler because he found out like I was doing the opening of Bloodstorm in Oklahoma, and crazy enough, he lives in Oklahoma. Now we did the majority of this film in Redding, California, but
What?
yeah, that's your old stomping grounds, right, Redding?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Micah had emailed me, and so he must have heard me say it on a video. He said, "Hey, I heard you're doing the opening, or not but I heard you're shooting some of Bloodstorm in Oklahoma. I'd love to help out and just hang out on set or be a PA or whatever." And because I know his background, I'm just like, I talked to Renee and like, we gotta do a fight. I gotta do a fight scene with this guy. Like he's too good not to do a fight scene with. So we got a very, very cool fight scene at the beginning of the film.
I'll talk about Micah for a second.
Oh, sure.
He was very early on with us too on the forums. Like he was there at the beginning. One of those guys who was sharing sound effects with it was like a commune almost. We were just like, hey, I ripped this sound effect from this movie. It's a good punch. Well, I got this good miss sound. We'd like share all these things, right? And we'd share filmmaking tips. And Micah really like nailed the YouTube format. And a lot of us looked to you, Micah, for like, dang, how like you really hit on this sort of like you're a smart dude, Micah, and a lot of us were trying to crack that as well. So kudos to Micah, man. Like that was a lot of stuff. I mean, he was putting out a lot of stuff. I remember like there'd be something all the time, and he really took the real contact to the bank. That was inspired by Ong Bak, I'm sure, but man, like you kind of took it to its logical extreme. Pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, he was cool to work with and a great performer, man. So, but yeah, cool trivia, man. And he was telling me about the old days, early YouTube and all that. But yeah, he really blew up, dude. Like everybody knows who Quan Kicker was back in the day, Like I was watching his videos, because I have a Taekwondo background too, and he was mixing that with the Muay Thai and everything else. So cool stuff. So anyway, Eric, I know you had about an hour. We went a little bit longer. I do appreciate you joining these great stories that you shared and everything else. And it's really cool what you're doing now with the motion cap. The book sounds amazing. The Dream Project sounds amazing. And yeah, that potential investor dude, hopefully he contacts you, and maybe get that project up and running. And we'll hook you up with Vic Mignogna. Great voice
He just
actor.
texted me, by the way. He's really excited. He wants to connect with you.
Yeah, we'll link. We'll link you up with
number one voice actor in the world. So
he's
it might
huge.
work.
Yeah. We're putting the team together right now for your project.
Yeah, brilliant movie producer to himself, man. Have you ever seen any of his work? The Star Trek stuff he did?
No.
I'll have to send it to you. It's a really brilliant guy.
But he did a lot of the famous anime, like Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, Full Metal Alchemist. It's like 400 of them. So he's going to conventions all the time, signing autographs, doing all kinds of stuff. So he's pretty well known. Well, very well known in the community.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Voice acting is like, man, that's a skill. That kind of blows my mind that you can sit in a room and look at a line on paper and make that work for anything. I'm always blown away by that. So much respect to anybody who does that.
Yeah, he's great at that, and he wants to do more live action. I'm actually going to work on a film with him later called Possum Kingdom. Hopefully, we start shooting this year. That's a very interesting project. But anyway, we will connect you with this guy.
I was trying to think of a funny story to convey to you guys.
Oh, yeah. Back to Antonio's question. If you could think of something very funny or memorable that people may not know about.
There was a moment when I was doing Tekken in real life in my garage. And I was married at the time. And, I had been doing this Tekken in real life thing for 8 months at the time. Right. And it got a little bit elaborate over time. Right. Like I started getting costumes and I think this day I was doing Paul Phoenix and I literally had this like yellow chef's hat that I put on my head to like emulate his super tall like crew cut.
Yeah.
And I had the red gi with the sleeves cut off. and I just looked like a doofus. And my wife at the time, she comes in and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing? We have no money." And I'm like, "I'm doing something important right now. I promise you." I had no idea what I was doing. I just wanted to do it. And again, I was just doing Tekken in real life because I loved doing it. It was a challenge, like I was trying to emulate Tekken movements, and I did it because I loved it. Like my best month on YouTube was like $800. It was my best month. That was when I was getting millions of views. $800 on a month. Like that's not half of rent where I was living at the time. So this was not going to work out. I didn't know where it was going. I just did it because I loved it. Fast forward about a month, that's when I get called to do God of War because they saw it.
Oh, wow. So that paid off hugely. That's awesome. Yeah.
And it's not just because I did Paul Phoenix with the yellow chef's hat. It's because I did 35 of these things.
Oh, yeah, sure, man.
The consistency is what sort of like drove it because, I talk to those animators regularly and they say, if you had only done like one video, we wouldn't have called you. But the fact that you had like 30 of these things and we could sit there for an hour and a half watching you, abuse yourself while trying to copy Tekken moves, that is what kind of like made them pull the trigger. And there's a funny reaction video. So like they made a video about me doing God of War as the stuntman. And part of that behind the scenes video showed my Tekken in real life. It's like, talking about how they saw me doing Tekken in real life. And then there's this funny reaction video. It's probably still out there somewhere of guys watching, of these two guys watching me talking about doing like Paul Phoenix in my garage. Right. And they're like, their response is, so you just have to like do Tekken stuff in your garage and you could be a stuntman in motion capture?
It's easy as that. That's all you got to do.
Like, yeah. 35 times, but yeah, do it because you love it though. That's what I always say. That's the secret to success.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, Eric, thanks. This was great having you on, man. And thanks for sharing all those cool stories. And that's a great way to end this stream here. And Richard says, great stream, guys. Thanks, Richard. And thanks everybody for watching. And yeah, we'll be back for the next one.
Right on. Thanks, guys.